Hey everybody, my name is Ranveer Gujral, co-founder and CEO of Chute. Actually, really excited to be here with you today to discuss the results of a brand new survey done by Digiday, actually released this morning, on the state of the industry, talking specifically about visual marketing. So what does that actually mean, right? What's visual marketing? Turns out it's pretty easy to define. It's marketing with a focus on the visual content that we use, the visuals, the illustrations, the photos. This is really important in an era in which our attention spans are dramatically decreasing and our digital consumption is really rising. And digging a little bit beneath the surface, what we're really focused on here is not just the actual content, but the process by which we discover that content or acquire or create that content, and we actually push it out into the world. This is becoming so important that we have to overcome some of the challenges that we face today as marketers, right? So according to the National Center for Biotechnology Information, the average attention span over the last decade and a half has actually dropped by 50%, from 12 seconds in 2000 to 8 seconds in 2013. This is 1 second less than the attention span of a goldfish. So ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the people of Earth, right? Underperforming goldfish since 2013. So if I have to compete for this tiny sliver of attention, how do I do that, right? How do I do that in this world of sort of visual marketing? The good news is that visuals are actually processed by the human brain 60,000 times faster than text. This is how we as early humans survived the savannah. This is actually how we as marketers have a tiny sliver of opportunity to get someone's attention before they goldfish out. And we actually have the opportunity to succeed in a world in which text-based content didn't succeed. So that's what we, as Chute and Digiday, partnered together to do in this survey, where we surveyed over 200 brand marketers to find out what's working, what's not working, and how the industry could be better. So it turns out that marketers are pretty obsessed with visuals. Super important. Over 72% of you say that visual content is more effective in driving our KPIs. And those KPIs are actually 4.4 times higher than in a text-based alternative or text world. So that's pretty compelling evidence, right? And it's pretty platform agnostic. So it works across desktop and mobile. In fact, in certain instances, mobile is a better platform for delivering visual content than is desktop. So we know it works, right? That's actually probably not much of a surprise to most of us in the room. But are we prioritizing it? Are we actually doing it? Are we putting our money where, the audience's mouth is? Well, actually, yeah. Turns out 49% of marketers actually spend over 25% of their time as a team sourcing, designing, adjusting, or handling visual content that they're going to push out across their social channels. So their advertisements, social, website, all of their marketing content, all of their marketing channels. And over 58% believe that this process is somewhat broken, and they're going to spend the majority of this year trying to effectively fix this visual marketing workflow. And 58% say that's actually a high or very high priority. Okay, so we know that it works. We know that we're going to prioritize it. Are we going to put money behind it? By 2016, over 1/3 of marketing budgets are actually going to go towards this life cycle of producing and ultimately publishing visuals to try to find our buyer, our consumer, at the right place at the right time on the medium that they choose. So everything's hunky-dory, right? We know what we got to do. We're starting to do it. We're starting to put a little bit of time and money behind it. It's all rainbows and butterflies in marketing land, right? Am I right? No problems. No, actually, no. The survey says we're not quite close to that yet. Let me ask you guys a question. What source of visual content do you think is implemented the most? Stock. It's a lovely family. Lovely. What source of visual content is actually least effective? Stock. According to this survey, quite literally every other source of content available to marketers today outperforms stock imagery. Everything. It was a long list. You'll see. So we know what we got to do. We're starting to do it, and we're literally using the least effective medium possible. So what's the disconnect? Well, turns out this stuff is hard, yo. Right? 2/3 of you don't have the budget or the time or the resources that you actually want to create that compelling visual that you know is so perfect. So let me just log into my Getty subscription and find a family on the beach and post them. Right? I'm going to put my logo on it. I'm going to remix it, or I'm going to put some things on it. But, that's what I'm going to do. And the other thing is we're in the midst of this thing we call the visual revolution. It's never been easier for consumers to create and post content. And we as consumers are not just consuming more content than we ever have, right? Thank you, Netflix and Instagram and YouTube. We're actually creating more content than we ever have, to the tune of over 1 trillion photos and videos every year. Well, the impact on marketers is pretty profound, because that means that we're not just competing with other brands and other forms of entertainment for our consumers' attention. We're competing with your mom. Your mom posts a lot on Facebook. So does your aunt. And the problem there is that we have this tiny sliver, less than a goldfish's worth of attention that we have to compete for. 80% of marketers see yo mama as a threat. So what are we going to do about that? What's actually getting in the way of this galactic battle we have with your mother for attention on Facebook and other social channels, right? Because we know that visual marketing is effective. We know that we all want to do it. We're making strides, and we're putting budget behind it. And we know that it's really hard. So we asked you specifically, what do you need to do to get over these hurdles? What do you need to do to actually be successful, right? What tools do you need? What infrastructure do you need? Well, it turns out you guys need a lot of stuff that's not yet widely available or not yet widely implemented, but it's possible. So the first thing is that collecting and managing visual media is actually really, really hard. So it turns out that if I have stock from one source and I'm doing user-generated elsewhere, and I, of course, have my professional photography that's constantly going, and I'm trying to get my employees to do things, these are all living in different silos, and the challenges are really profound when I'm the one that has to bring this together in some sort of cohesive strategy and sort of publishing process. Content creation, if it's my responsibility, as we talked about before, is really, really difficult. I just never have the time and the money and the patience, the budget, and all of the things that I want to create that perfect piece of visual content that I can deliver to the right person at the right place at the right time that I know is going to work better than my alternative resource. But the number one reason that's actually related to the fourth one as well is that I don't have the ability to actually dive in and understand what content is going to work. Right? No one's telling me. There's no magic formula that says this is the key to virality, right? But the one thing that is out there in the world but not yet actionable is all of these consumers on all of these social networks engaging with all of this different type of content. And if I could just somehow, as a marketer, package that in a way that helps predict for me the content that's going to perform on the specific channel I want it to perform on, wouldn't that be neat? So there's a word for this, right? This process. We call it visual marketing automation as an emerging category. And what visual marketing automation attempts to do is actually solve this workflow issue. So it starts by collecting and helping you manage in one place all of the visual content that's flowing through your entire enterprise. And you guys know some of it's in email, and some of it's in Dropbox, and some of it's on the agency's Basecamp, and it's all over the place. And it's really difficult to find that asset that you want when you want it. The second part is that I want to mine insights from that content, particularly the user-generated content, and I want to understand what's actually resonating. And that helps inform the content that I then produce and I push out into the world. And I want to take the insights and the performance data from that content, and I want to bring it back to the beginning of the funnel that helps me optimize my calendar and my strategy, right? It's kind of hard to do today. So this is what the survey tells us. These are the challenges that marketers face. So we as Chute, our role in all this, is we have this not so modest ambition of wanting to give brands mastery over this subject. over the world's visual media. We are the world's first visual marketing automation platform. So what that means is we can manage all of your owned content in one place. We can manage all of your earned media and actually give you the ability to reach out to the world and get consent and rights to use user-generated content in real time. And of course, publishing that content everywhere you tell your brand story. A billboard in Times Square, a banner ad in e-commerce execution, all of your social. And then of course, attempting to close the loop with what's actually performing. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. The survey is available on the Digiday website. There's actually a URL here on the screen as well. It was just released this morning. It's got a lot of rich data in it. And thanks. Hope you read it.
Okay. Before we go to questions from the audience, I have a few of my own.
Yeah.
Your argument was pretty sound. It was pretty colorful, which was nice. But I have a question about one of your premises. Is it slightly anachronistic to refer to visual marketing as this sort of discrete type of marketing? Isn't most, or I would say all, digital marketing today visual in some capacity?
Yeah, it certainly should be. So visual marketing to us is just a function that needs to be solved. So it's like CRM. It's like marketing automation itself. It's like all these tools that we have within marketing that actually helps us achieve our goals. And I would actually liken it a bit to even the overall planning process. So when you think about marketing and its function, you think about things like strategy and planning and media buying and execution. Visual marketing is becoming so important, and in fact, more important in this world, because now I have so many hungry mouths to feed. And by hungry mouths, I mean, what am I putting on Instagram every day, and YouTube, and Pinterest, and Facebook, and Twitter, and Weibo, and all of these other channels that I now have to push content into? If I'm a brand marketer, today I'm actually producing more discrete pieces of visual content in a month than I used to in a year, and just 3 or 4 years ago. And I think what's happened is there's not been a commensurate increase in manpower. There hasn't been a commensurate increase in budget. And so what's happening is social teams are becoming the human meat shields for what marketing needs to achieve and what sort of what budget they need to have. So we believe that creating efficiency out of this process of sort of discovering and creating content and pushing it out into the world is actually a function that needs to be addressed on its own.
Mm-hmm. And then on the topic of all these different types of visual media, you talked about stock photography being one of the ones that's used most frequently, but also one of the most ineffective. Does this have anything to do with sort of the pressure to produce in real time and react to real events? And if it does, I guess, how can streamlining or automating solve that?
I think it has a lot to do with that. So it has a lot to do with budgets, it has to do with planning cycles, and it does, to a certain extent, have to do with wanting to be reactive. I think if you want to be a real-time marketer or a reactive marketer, or at least participate in the conversation in a timely way, it's not just sort of what's in my specific source of content that I'm going to use. It actually is more of a philosophical change. You have to always be on, right? You have to always be in the mode of, I have content at my disposal. Mm-hmm. What we would espouse is that the best pieces of content are these authentic moments that your customers are taking about your brand. And you should always be collecting those, and you should be creating your own sort of Getty Images library of these authentic, real moments that you can tap into the same way you would tap into a stock moment.
Right. And my last question is just, you talked about a number of, or at least you showed a number of different aspects to this process, from the insights to the managing of assets. Which of those is the most difficult for automation or streamlining to deal with?
I would say probably insights. Look, the entire process of actually figuring out what you want to talk about, putting it into a calendar, getting the assets created, and figuring out where that's all going to come from, and ultimately figuring out workflow and permissions, and et cetera, and then doing that on a global basis and multiplying it by anywhere from 5 to 100, depending on the scale of brand that you have. It's just a very, very daunting process. And right now, it's an immense amount of people power. So agencies and budgets and things where you really want to do something that's end-to-end sort of, seamless. But if I was to mark one challenge that I believe can be dramatically improved with software, it's actually the creative part. It's the part that right now has the most guesswork. And I think if you can actually really understand what your consumers are engaging with, and that could be as simple as the topics or hashtags that are trending, but even more complicated could be understanding the sentiment and the things that really, really drive their engagement on a social channel, if I can somehow package that for you in a way that lets you act on it right now, I think that's really important.
Excellent. I think we have time maybe for one quick question from the audience, if there's one.
Hey, we saw that example with Coke, right, where it was like, hey, we love your picture. Can we post it? If so, use hashtag #YesCoke. And so I'm wondering, is there any legal precedent in terms of, what is permission for users, for a brand to then use somebody's photo? Is it that hashtag? Is there any precedent legally, or is it whatever the company's legal department is comfortable with at this point?
Yeah, I think if you talk about legal precedents in terms of case law or actually legislation, no, unfortunately there's not, which actually creates this bit of uncertainty and angst, I think, for corporate legal. We deal with, obviously, global brands and legal departments every single day, and there's varying degrees of comfort with what they'll do. Some people are okay with reaching out on a social channel, provided that person has already mentioned the brand or has already engaged with a promoted hashtag that is clearly about the brand. Some people are willing to reach out to anybody. And then some people say, okay, a hashtag-based response is okay. Some people say, we love your photo and we want to use it. Please go to this URL to complete this form and click I accept on terms and conditions. One thing that the world has largely gotten to, however, and I wouldn't say everybody, some people still want paper releases, but if I go to a website and I upload something and I click I accept terms and conditions, most legal departments have already fought that battle, let's say 10 years ago, or 5 to 10 years ago, and so there's a level of comfort there. Now, are they comfortable with this exchange happening purely on social media via hashtag? Some are and some aren't, but we have many, many case studies and white papers that attempt to get people comfortable with that.
All right, and I think that's all the time we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So right now, there is a coffee